Yes, dear ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the APIC, I am very pleased that you have found your way to our series of presentation on AI and transcendental philosophy this winter semester, and today's presentation is the first of several presentations that will take place over the next weeks and months. The APIC, to say a few words about us as an organization or archive library for post-Neo-Kantianism and contemporary critical idealism, was founded in 2021 at the University of Wuppertal by Michael Boch, who is among us today, Alexander Schnell and myself. The main goals of the APIC are to explore and expand on contemporary transcendental philosophy and contemporary idealism as well. For this purpose, the archive itself exists in a physical form in Wuppertal, Germany, and mainly consists of the growing complete editions and private libraries of prominent transcendental philosophers of the 20th and 21st centuries. Likewise, the APIC's own volume series, which is called Systemata, has recently been created with the Wissenschaftliche Buchgesellschaft in Germany, in Darmstadt. Its first two volumes will be published in the near future. In addition, the APIC is also a network for researchers interested in transcendental philosophy and idealism in the broadest sense of the terms. At the moment, it consists of numerous members and acts as a networking platform for events and projects. You can see some of our members and associates on the picture to the right bottom. Our big opening conference, which is where the picture was taken in February 2023, was followed by smaller workshop events and now the first online series of individual presentations. These presentations on AI and transcendental philosophy form the focus and kickoff for the special work areas of the APIC. So in a second step, I'd like to say a few things about those special work areas. For the APIC sees itself on the one hand, of course, as an archive and research network of its own philosophical tradition, namely transcendental philosophy and transcendental idealism or critical idealism. On the other hand, it takes part in current debates and discourses from the point of view of transcendental philosophy and philosophical idealism. In this regard, the APIC currently includes the following research fields. 1. The history of systematic transcendental philosophy and its current and contemporary tradition. 2. AI, digitality and transcendental philosophy. 3. Post-colonial and feminist theory and transcendental philosophy. And 4. Intercultural philosophy and transcendental philosophy. A fifth field, however, will soon be added to these four with regard to current research in the natural sciences and the theory of the sciences as a whole. Now, the presentations, ladies and gentlemen, in the series AI and Transcendental Philosophy form the first event in the work area AI, Digitality and Transcendental Philosophy. It is highlighted in red at the moment. So now I would like to introduce you to the individual dates of the winter semester once again. You can see them here. And as you can see, we will be dealing with a wide range of topics in this first round. More rounds, of course, will follow in the summer semester and in following semesters. For we believe that transcendental philosophy and idealism have some important, maybe some crucial contributions to make to questions of digitality and AI. And they can also overcome challenges that arise in the current discussion about the digital realm as a whole. For this reason, to begin with my presentation today, ladies and gentlemen, for this reason, my introductory lecture is called Transcendental Idealism Meets AI, Challenges and Opportunities. Thus, Today I would like to talk a little bit about what problems, what challenges, what perspectives and what chances can arise from the point of view of transcendental idealism with regard to artificial intelligence as a phenomenon. The presentation will therefore provide an overview of questions rather than specific answers. Of course, we can address possible attempts to some replies on the raised questions in the discussion after the presentation, and also the other lectures of the series are dedicated to some of the more specific approaches, but I will today mainly focus on raising questions from the point of view of transcendental philosophy. So let's start, shall we? Now, my presentation consists of two main blocks. In the first and very short part, I would like to give an overview of what we mean by AI in a very general sense. So please be prepared. I will have to leave out many details and specific characterizations of AI. The second and longer part will then pose 8 specific questions from the point of view of transcendental idealism with regard to AI. Those questions all center around what challenges and what opportunities arise from the standpoint of transcendental philosophy within the emergence of so-called artificial intelligence. I say so-called because the term artificial intelligence is of course in itself a mishap. However, the history of this AI could actually be stretched back thousands of years. For AI is by no means just a phenomenon of the 20th and 21st centuries. It just got a new name, you could say, and a new framing by the technological advances in recent times and recent decades. Unfortunately, we don't have time to delve deeper into this historical perspective and thus limit ourselves to AI's current form, which is the form of an automated method of digital algorithmization of reality. Now, you could ask, what does that mean? What does an automated method of digital algorithmization of reality mean? So let's delve deeper into this, shall we? AI is a specific form in general of digitalization or digitization. You can use both terms in English. I will stick with the former term. Digitalization, and in short, what is it? Is in a very broad sense, a very old and in fact a very original project of mankind. For it actually takes place wherever reality is made interpretable, usable and processable by specific methods as what? As information. You can see this right here now on the screen. For this happens by a specific mode of conversion of reality into data. So you can see when I say digitalization is a very old project of mankind, I mean it. For to give just one example, just by counting something with your fingers, you are converting it into data. You transform it into interpretable, usable and processable information, which is data. Hence, by the way, the name digitality, which is derived from the Latin digitus, which means finger. So, in digitalization, you consider how you can transform reality into specific kinds of available data through certain forms of its representational conversion, just as you do when you count something with your fingers. So far, so short, of course. Now, we could ask, where in these diverse kinds of the conversion of reality to data does the so-called artificial intelligence appear on the stage? Artificial intelligence in the broadest sense means that the mentioned conversion of reality to data occurs in an automated form. Therefore, terms such as algorithm, pattern recognition or training, digital training, play a decisive role in this context. In short, by AI, a task is to be performed using specific rules and instructions of conversion for the solution of this very task. And we do that in a finite number of steps. That's, by the way, also the definition of an algorithm. Such a solution becomes artificial intelligence if it applies to the aforementioned data conversion and, on top of that, is algorithmically automated. It's a conversion process that uses automatization. You know, it's not done by putting in some specific tasks or anything like that, especially not by a human being, but it's a process of automatization of the conversion of reality to data by algorithms. Now, ladies and gentlemen, such a short sketch of AI is of course very broad and simplifies a lot. If we were to expand this view in more detail, for example, we could talk about terms like classic AI, machine learning, deep learning, AI neural networks, transistor circuits, weights and biases, also about algorithms and the like. Some of these terms will be discussed in the future presentation of our series, of course. However, what is important to us now for today's lecture is that AI performs, I repeat it, an automated conversion to data according to specific algorithms, and it makes reality processable in this specifically automated way. That's the crucial point. Reality, you could say in other words, is thereby constructed as a problem area with very specific properties. For individual problems shall be solved by using the very algorithms on which they are initially based on. So I repeat that. A problem shall be solved by the very algorithms that contributed to the rise of the problems that should then be solved by them. That's the whole point, and such a logical circle always suggests, from a philosophical point of view, a transcendental idealistic perspective on AI. So let's talk about that a little bit. In a general sense, ladies and gentlemen, transcendental philosophy is based on the following very short insight. Reality is not simply grasped dogmatically as some kind of given thing or something like that, but reality is logically preformed and co-created by our own experiential structures and frames. This is how reality logically becomes our reality in the first place. So in other words, there are certain logical forms that ontologically condition and precondition reality and therefore make it possible as reality in the first place. These forms for transcendental philosophy are manifest in our intellectual capacities. In this regard, to give just one example, Immanuel Kant once famously said, I quote from his Prolegomena, "Our understanding does not draw its laws from nature, but prescribes those laws to nature," unquote. Or to put it another way, the way we relate to reality conditions and makes this reality possible as a reality for us. And this is the only way, according to transcendental idealism, in which our ways of relating to reality are themselves grounded and justified. So that means in turn, our logical capacities realize themselves in the act of making reality possible. So they become themselves real in the act of making reality even possible in the first place. And we traditionally call this dynamic of a reciprocal relationship between cognition and reality idealism. That's what the core of idealism is, this dynamic reciprocity between Yeah, well, you could say logic and ontology. I just said cognition and reality, which is just another way of putting it. So the central principle of transcendental idealism is, to express it once again, that nothing is just a given or even a given thing, but that we always actively deal with reality, that we precondition it and therefore always already influence its very being for us. And we do that also even if we accept it as a merely given reality. For grasping reality as something that is merely given to us is just one other way to logically pattern it and to logically precondition it. Now, even another way to deal with reality in such a reciprocal and preconditioning way is to automatically convert it into usable data by the use of algorithms. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly what AI does. Thus, we now want to examine this specific type and the specific structure of the transcendental grounding of reality by the very process that we call artificial intelligence. Now, to achieve this, I have prepared short sketches, namely 8 of them, and they are short sketches of 8 selected challenges and opportunities that rise from our initial question, that rise from the meeting of transcendental idealism and artificial intelligence. So let's start with our 8 main steps. If transcendental philosophy, ladies and gentlemen, means, as I just said, that we examine the conditions under which reality is made possible and graspable for us in the first place, we also have to examine these conditions for the form, the logical form even, of AI. That is to say, we have to investigate what kind of logic underlies the conversion of reality to an algorithmical automation and automatization. Or in other words, on what basis could the logic of reality, this is a very complex idealistic way to put it, on what basis could the very logic of reality itself come up in us with the idea of automatically converting and processing itself through artificial intelligence. So that's the idealistic way to put it, isn't it? Reality relates to itself as an automatic process of conversion, and relates to itself therefore by becoming AI, you could say. Now, this very process of conversion and of the further processing of reality by AI is ultimately based on a logic of what I'd like to call consequences, quantification, statistics, and mathematization. And how does that work physically? Well, transistors are connected into formal logical structures, so they are interconnected by laws of formal logic. And those formal logical structures are mathematically guided by the principle of a more or less consistent non-contradiction. You all know those kinds of commands in at least the simplest forms of programming languages. Think of commands like if, then, else, of and or. Those are the basic forms of formal logic, and transistor circuits are created around those simple structures of formal logic. Thus, an idea of the quantifiable consistency is the prime logical condition of AI from a transcendental point of view. In AI, in other words, structures based on this principle, namely the principle of a quantifiable consistency and non-contradiction of formal logic, these structures are currently called weights and biases. To give just one example, if you are accustomed to the language of AI creators. And by this, reality shall be made predictable, quantifiable, and processable in terms of different kinds of logical consequentiality. So A leads to B, B leads to C, and so on. This aligns reality, of course, from a transcendental point of view, this aligns reality with the structure of formal consistency and quantitative relevance. For instance, a data reality is then conducted by the non-contradictory statistical principles that it stems from. So reality becomes a matter of non-contradictory statistics rather than, I don't know, true or false or something like that. Thus, everything in reality, in AI reality that is, becomes a problem of quantification, consistency, mathematization, and interconnected statistics, or in short, everything becomes data. Now, transcendental philosophy means to explore, to examine, and of course to critically evaluate such an algorithmic preconditioning of reality, and it also means to examine what follows from it in a theoretical and, as we will see in a few moments, in an ethical sense. But let's stay for the moment with the theoretical sense of evaluating it, of evaluating data reality, that is. Step 2. In addition to the recently and aforementioned exploration of the logic underlying AI as a phenomenon, AI can itself in turn be viewed as a specific transcendental condition of making our experience of reality possible. So we turn our perspective around and do not examine the underlying logic of AI, which makes AI possible as a form of reality, but now understand AI itself as a form of preconditioning some kind of the experience of reality. And now we have to ask, which kind of experience and of reality is made possible by AI as a transcendental form? Well, we could say operating with an already algorithmically datafied reality means that also even our modes of thought, experience, and consciousness are based on such automatically generated data and information. That means an always already datafied reality grounds its own modes of being grasped in the next step. It grounds the very cognition that is then able to grasp this data reality. This means that we use the very data provided by AI to enhance our own modes of consciousness. For example, the information provided by AI. It is therefore very important to learn and to see AI in a transcendental way as an a priori condition of cognition and experience. If left unchecked, thinking, experience, even consciousness itself are transformed into mere automatized algorithms. Or, as you could put it, into modes of calculation rather than being modes of conceptualization. To think then becomes to mathematize. To act then becomes a mere statistic consequentialism, which is, by the way, why the views of utilitarianism in an ethical sense are the main ethical views of a reality preconditioned by AI as its own transcendental form, or precondition. If you want to delve deeper into this, however, ladies and gentlemen, into this very complex structure, I have a presentation online on my YouTube channel on this specific matter, where I view the problem of algorithms being installed as a grounding form of reality and of the grasping of reality from the standpoint of Hegelian logic. For I think Hegelian logic, the science of logic by Hegel, has to say very much and very interesting things about this problem. We, however, continue our journey through our 8 steps now. Ladies and gentlemen, that AI is itself a transcendental preconditioning form of reality, as I said in the second step, also raises the transcendental question of whether AI can be understood as a subject, and it raises also the question what a subject even is. Thus, in this context, the question as to what such subjectivity actually is in itself arises, and also in this regard, the following questions of personhood, of interpersonality, of intersubjectivity, and so on, arise as soon as we are confronted with automatized datafication processes, that is, with AI. In short, by AI, the old philosophical question of how can we even identify a subject as a subject, a person as a person, once again arises by different means historically. And this relates also to the question of intelligent consciousness, of its material form, and thus you could say in one final sentence, and thus it leads to a new edition of a very old philosophical problem, namely the mind-body problem. This new version that we encounter in AI of the mind-body problem or mind-body dualisms is one of the points, as you all may know, that is also being hotly debated in public perception with regard to AI, especially, for example, in trans and post-humanism and the debate on the human-machine boundary. It is a new form, you could say, of the old problem of the human. So in history we discussed about human-animal boundaries and stuff like that, and now we also talk about the human-machine boundary, and you can see what it means to be human, what it means to be a subject or a person comes to mind. And transcendental philosophy has always had this very question at its center, or it's one of the questions at its center. What is a subject? In how far are we subjects, and what does it mean to be a person, to have dignity as well, and to be an acting subject among other other subjects. Now, to move on, one can deal with this problem area, among other things, from the perspective of Immanuel Kant. Kant calls it the paralogism in the question of subjectivity. According to Kant, the paralogistic fallacy lies in an inadmissible psychologization of subjectivity to a measurable empirical object, and therefore not as a subject but an object with thing-like properties. Therefore, from a transcendental perspective, the whole debate about something like the psychological consciousness of AI or something like that is an askew and logically undue question, according to Kant, because we are talking about a subject as if it were an object when talking about if AI is a subject. But subjects are not objects with objective properties. For this discussion is based on an inadmissible reduction of subjectivity to an empirically describable pseudo-object. Rather, and conversely, AI itself for transcendental philosophy can be grasped as a concept of subject, a dangerous concept of subject, that is reduced to a mere automated logic of consequences, of mathematical statistics, and of consequentialist non-contradiction. And we have to ask ourselves, is that all we can say about a subject being a subject, that it is an automated logic of consequences? Transcendental idealism, however, opposes such a reduction with a concept of the subject and subjectivity as self-determination, free agency, and, what's most important, purposefulness. A subject is able to deal with reality in terms of purposefulness for transcendental philosophy. This leads to the next step and the next question, because in addition to subjectivity, there is also the question of the ontological status of the object in AI reality. What are objects in this reality? That means, in an even shorter way, what is data anyway, with an emphasis on the is? What is the being of data? What is an object in AI and how does it come about? This, of course, raises many questions questions. For the example, the question of what material, so to say, actually is it that gets converted into data when automated and algorithmatized. So what is the material? Which material is transformed into data? And on top of that, how is cognition related to a reality converted into said data, especially if it finds itself already preconditioned by certain datafied structures, as I mentioned in the second step. Now, from a transcendental point of view, it is not just any empirical object in space-time that is converted to data. It is space-time itself that is converted and shall be converted to data. So even at this point already you could see the question and the emergence of AI as another, in a historical sense, as another triumph of rationalism. So everything shall be made a symbolizable relation of logical forms. So from this perspective, you could even say that the forms of intuition, as Immanuel Kant calls them, so space and time are our forms of intuition, are in danger of being converted to mere formal relations by AI. For through space-time's algorithmic conversion to automatized data, more and more operations shall be carried out in ever smaller time units. And this does something with time itself. Time itself becomes more and more dense and more converted to a field of data, a field of processes, so to say. And this establishes a changeable dynamic of space-time and also of the object within space-time. So space-time itself becomes, as some kind, you could say, of pseudo-relativistic mechanic in AI, space-time itself becomes a dynamic fabric that can be made denser or stretched out in terms of space, for example. So that raises the question, what is a phenomenological question? What is the phenomenon that we are talking about when talking about AI? Is AI a genuine phenomenon in itself, or is it some sort of pseudo-phenomenon that under rationalistic preconditioned tries to transform space-time and all the phenomena in space-time to some sort of formal logical data processes? To give two examples. On the one hand, this applies to temporal conditions in an ever-accelerated mode of datafication, and on the other hand, automated algorithms also enable various virtualized forms of space. Both directly affect the ways, and that's the transcendental view once again, both affect directly the ways we process information in the first place. And these ways also fall prey to a conversion to operationalized data. So our forms of intuition with Kantian terms or in Kantian terms, our own forms of intuition, namely space and time, are converted into operationalized data themselves. Once again, the modes of dealing with consciousness and its forms is directly affected by the conversions of space-time through AI. Such conversions also relate to the questions of algorithmically converted materiality of temporal and spatial forms to processable data and the like, and the implementation and application of machinery in the broadest sense in every aspect of our grasping and experience of reality. From a Kantian point of view, all this, in addition, represents a new variant of what Kant calls the first and the second antinomies of reason in the Critique of Pure Reason. That is the question of original ontological structures of an algorithmically automatized reality. So the question is, are there even such original structures? Is there an original substance that is datafied or not? Or is there only data in the end that waits to be grasped as data or converted to its initial ontological status as data? Ladies and gentlemen, I take a quick turn to practical philosophy with our next step, with our fifth step. In addition to such epistemological, ontological, and logical phenomena, there are of course also ethical challenges for a transcendental philosophy of AI. In fact, those ethical challenges even concern what is perhaps the central concept of transcendental idealism in general and as a whole, and that is the concept of freedom. The question namely arises as to whether and to what extent a data-converted reality is even capable of a logic of something like free agency. So, is an AI able to act and to act freely, which of course is a pleonasm because for transcendental philosophy the only way to act is to act freely. In any other case we do not act, we happen. For such an agency, and the transcendentally founded and grounded agency directly contradicts the logic that is based on derivable consequences and consistent algorithms, which is the logic of AI. So the logic of free agency at the first glance contradicts the logic of AI. I want to address this problem through the third antinomy of reason in Kant's Critique of Pure Reason. For AI also raises the transcendental question as to whether consequent logical chains of conditions and conclusions, of causes and effects, of, as it is put in AI terms, neuronal action potentials, if these chains of conditions and conclusions are ultimately the only way of understanding reality. So is our only way of understanding reality understanding it by the logic of cause and effect, of ground and grounded, of principle and principiata, and so on? Or is there a type of causality from, as Kant puts it, spontaneous freedom that is not algorithmic and therefore not based on any kind of logic of consequences? Or in short, is there a reality which could be called a reality non sequitur? A reality that is able to simply not follow from something else? And how would such a reality be thought of? And what would be the relation between the reality of AI, the data reality, and it as a reality of non sequitur? This is also linked to ethical questions as to whether an AI even can or should want or ought something. Whether it is capable of making decisions and thus act at all, and questions like that. So you see, it all directs our attention into the realm of free agency. And of course also about this there are many popular legal and moral discourses about the use of AI in our daily lives even. With the question of AI as a practical agent, I addressed it in step 5. Also the questions of transcendental teleology arise. So what does that mean? It means to ask which goals, which imperatives, and ultimately which ideas of the good are associated with AI and its ways of converting reality into data. Which good is aimed at if we want to convert reality into data? What do we want with it? With imperatives are there that we follow by it? Or in other words, what purposes are associated with the use and methods of data conversion? Is their establishment maybe even a purpose in itself, one could ask? Is it an ultimate purpose, for example, a purpose of history or of evolution, one could say, that reality is datafied? So thus, for example, the evolution of reality in the end aim at a reality being datafied, a reality becoming AI, and so on. Such questions also are, as you know, hotly debated throughout the public discussion on how to deal with AI. The question is AI a next step in evolution, and does it even make human beings as they are represented now in evolution obsolete, maybe? You know, so those are very hotly debated questions at the moment. Once again, we approach them with Kant's theory of transcendental antinomies. So, you know, we are now within the realm of the fourth of the four antinomies of reason. This fourth antinomy deals with the question of how the totality of reality is to be evaluated with regard to its context of meaning. What does, in other words, a specific reality mean for us who experience themselves in it, in this very reality? And this is linked to the mentioned question about the evolutionary or reductionist role of AI. It is linked to question of anthropology, of human self-image, and even of historical philosophical considerations. So where does a history lead to in whose course AI comes up and emerges at some point in time? All these questions depend on the evaluation of specific purposes of reality that AI is related to, and that's exactly what Kant's fourth antinomy is about. Is this whole development a necessary development, or is it just a development by accident, and could there be also another kind of reality, you know? So when it comes to automated algorithms, we can think of purposes, if we regard them as purposeful, we can on this basis think of purposes such as increases reality's predictability, its efficiency, its usability. So you know there again utilitarianism comes into play. After all, a very big dream of the algorithmic, consequentialist and automated data conversion is and will always be the deduction and the prediction of future. So the next step in datafication shall be deducible and shall be made deducible by AI. That's the big dream. And by this, such dimensions are of course also connected even to questions of spirituality and religion. Because if you ask me, the emergence of AI just makes a spiritual crisis that we are currently in even stronger and even a greater problem than it already is. Which leads us to step 7. The question of purposes that we addressed in step 6, the question of purposes of the conversion to data also touches upon aesthetic dimensions. For the conversion of space-time to data in the form of automatable algorithmic representations raises the question of what kind of representation and of representational system of data is an or even the adequate one. Now in transcendental idealism, how reality is represented and expressed is not just an accidental addition to it. The outer form, the external form of expressing something is not an accident that is, I don't know, that we add after the deed is done in terms of contents or whatever. So rather the modes of the expression of reality contribute to the very emergence of this reality. They are not accidents. They are not, well, they are not imaginary or even illusionary or something like that. So they are contributors to the very emergence of a reality. If you want examples, the young Schelling, for example, even understands the act of expression as the highest form of knowledge. So the act of expressing something, of letting it manifest itself, is the highest form of knowledge. Also, to give another example, also Hegel connects the emergence of knowledge to its most adequate expression, which is, in terms of his philosophy, a system of concepts. Now, as an automated algorithm, AI is also centrally involved in the development and further expansion of data representation systems. The question always is, how is the processed data sufficiently and adequately represented and expressed? How data is presented and expressed, namely, or how it is symbolized even, also determines how it can be further processed. So the ways and kinds of expressing and symbolizing data, for example, by counting your fingers or by writing numbers down. These ways and kinds of presenting and expressing data lead to different ways of being able to furtherly expressing and processing data. Thus, as strange as it may sound, the relation between AI and transcendental idealism can also be found on the field of aesthetics. It does matter how we express something, in realms of AI reality. For instance, in transcendental idealism, aesthetics is a form of knowledge, not just a matter of some kind of outer and external sensory pleasure. In the context of AI, this also touches upon even a transcendental concept of beauty, as well as a transcendental media theory, a philosophy of language, and of symbolic forms. You could think of Cassirer, for example, as data transmitting forms of representation. And in addition, this leads us to one last chance or opportunity or challenge that I'd like to express today. So to finish our short panorama, also legal, political and pedagogical questions attach themselves to the transcendental aspects of an algorithmic automation and automatization of reality, or in short, of AI. What does a virtuous handling of AI consist of? And what challenges lie in the foundations of the legal expression of reality in terms of its datafication? What social, political and legal answers can be given to the emergence of AI? Hence, from this point of view, artificial intelligence also continues to concern the project of the so-called enlightenment, in the sense of an enlightened handling and implementation of AI into our realms of reality and life. Now, especially from an ethical point of view, transcendental philosophy always investigates whether we should do everything we can do. And this, of course, does not only raise the mentioned moral questions, it also raises legal questions about the granting or the preventing of agency for AI. So where do we draw the line when it comes to AI, also in a legal sense? In addition, social questions, for example, the question of ownership concepts in data realities are related to this. For example, the question could and should arise: who in a data reality, in an AI reality, who is able or who is allowed to own data realities? For from the viewpoint of transcendental philosophy, this is especially important because ownership of data means owning knowledge and owning information processes. And that's the transcendental catch, and this means ultimately owning human consciousness and the human ability to act. Yeah, so who owns data reality owns the capabilities of human consciousness and therefore the human ability to act. Hence, questions of power and of dominance have to be addressed regarding AI from a transcendental point of view. For since Kant and Fichte, this has always meant elucidating human freedom in its own spheres of action and thus increasing and expanding this freedom instead of restricting it. And this is also where we have to deal with AI. Do we let it expand and increase freedom, or do we let it restrict it? This also leads to very specific goals for our handling of AI, for example, in coexistence with us. This is particularly another field of interest. Questions arise, for example, of how can AI be an instrument for us, a collaborator for us, even maybe, as absurd as it sounds, a fellow for us, but without costing us our freedom and or our humanity. So you see, this is a completely other field of important questions that we have to deal with regarding AI. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, there are numerous perspectives for transcendental idealism to engage in questions on AI and in digitality in general. So to sum it up now and to provide you with a project that I am currently working on, I'd like to state the following thought-provoking approach. Maybe digitality as a whole is just a new name in the history of thought for what philosophy called transcendentality in the times of Kant and German idealism. Maybe this is just a new name for the same problem. And if that is the case, which I will try to show in the future, then transcendental idealism is not just one, but the central dialogue partner for question of digitality, virtual reality, and datafication of reality. But this, of course, ladies and gentlemen, will be an issue for a future or for several future presentations. For now, ladies and gentlemen, by the presented 8 perspectives, and these 8 perspectives of course are not exhaustive, there are more of them. By their presentation, however, I have tried to indicate some challenges and possibilities in areas that can arise from a transcendental philosophical view of AI. Thus, my presentation was meant as a kickoff for the APICS work area, AI, Digitality and Transcendental Philosophy, that I mentioned in the beginning of my talk. It intended to open up a first general approach which we will work on in the following series of presentations and the research area dedicated to them within the APIC. So at the following dates of this winter semester, you can see them on your screen right now, my colleagues will look at certain details of the topics presented today, and I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you and a warm invitation to those presentations. Moreover, there are already initial plans for a continuation of this series during the summer semester, and with this in mind, I would like to thank you very much for your attention, ladies and gentlemen, and hope you participate in our further work in the area of transcendental philosophy and digitality in the APIC. Thank you very much and have a nice evening.